First of all, I have some initial confessions to make to all of you. The first confession that I have is that I actually love technology. Since I was a very, very young girl, my mother is an engineer. I was in love with technology and all the things that she was doing. I was always trying to look at the devices and see how things work and getting really excited and taking her computer when she was not looking at. And I really like technology. I'm not a technology hater, and I certainly will never go to the mountains to live disconnected and without electricity and access to the internet. If you keep me away from my computer toys for longer than a week, I will probably collapse. That's the first confession. The second confession is that I'm not a technologist. So I am, by formation, I'm a lawyer, but by self-formation, I have learned about technology by basically peer-to-peer knowledge acquired from my very, very geeky friends who are like computer experts, security experts, and so on. So it is not what I know about technology is not my official formation. It's like more knowledge that I have acquired from my teenager years. And the third confession that I have to make to all of you, disclosure, is that I do not know a lot about Serbia and specific Serbia situation, legislation, and cases around this topic happening here. But if there's any question about this, there's an excellent organization here working in those issues, Share Foundation. They have very specialized knowledge on all these issues that I will discuss here today on the local context. So having that disclosure, let's begin. And I would like to begin. That will be the structure of what we will talk today. We will talk about the digital despot. It sounds very bombastic, the topic, the title, I know, but it is more that the first part will be a reflection of today and our role in today. The second part will look at the future of institutions and how institutions that we took for granted are transforming very rapidly and will impact our future and the future of the kids that you might have, and also the next generations and so on. And the third is the new political configurations and how technology plays a fundamental role on it and on how the future will be shaped. So, but before, because I know that we will not, it will take time to get to the hard political issues. I want to take a look at these two slides. These two slides are not mine. These two slides are from technologists from Germany. His name is Andy Müller-Magun, and he has this very strong critique on internet freedom as it is framed by US military-industrial complex. And he highlights here how in the old days any news organization will be very hierarchical, and any news organization in any country will exercise like very strict control on what is distributed, how it's communicated. That was the mainstream media as we knew it. And how, with the creation of the internet, this really changed, and this is shaped by the specific ideology of Silicon Valley ideology, basically. And that's the critique that he makes, that even we enjoy this different freedom of free flow of information and circulation and publication and so on. But we paid, and it is already done. There's nothing that we can do about it. We paid with serious problems of mass surveillance. All citizens all over the world are surveyed in real time, and of intellectual property in the form of super strong copyright regimes that will restrict our right to share and to participate in culture. and like depowering of local structures, and how difficult it is to be different and to be out of the system and developing your own systems today. And the last critique that I want you to remember during all this conversation is that the dominant actor in this new ecosystem of information is US. And Andy, says that US is a totalitarian country. That was slides that he prepared during Obama presidency when Trump wasn't elected yet, so just as disclosure. So during this presentation, I want you to bear that technology is not isolated from politics, and that our individual freedom can never be isolated from our collective freedom and the free will of collectives, nations, regions, and the entire world, basically. So keeping that in mind, let's move to discuss who is the digital despot. So you know, despots in the past, I mean, they were a little bit in love with themselves. They liked to see the portrait everywhere. They liked to be recognized. They liked to be feared. They liked to be present, you know, like in many the despot in my country. I mean, in each and every office of Guatemala, there was his portrait, like him looking like wonderful, and in the streets, and phrases and themes, and they were very, very, very present. The digital despot of today is ubiquitous. We cannot, and instead of pushing for that admiration, it wants to be invisible, you know? It wants to be like, you do not realize that it's there, and there is a presence in each and every aspect of your life. The digital despot of today does not need to impose fear to trap you into the system. The digital despot of today plays. You don't need fear when you can play with the vanity of the people, with the envy of the people, with the desire to show off and to. It's a constant. The digital despot of today is pushing you to show off in real time at all times. You swipe left, you swipe right, you swipe left, you swipe right, you scroll down. You are like, sometimes you take your telephone, you open the browser, and you're lost there for hours without even realizing where the time went. I mean, you open the computer and you were supposed to send an email. Just an email, like, you know, just send your report about school, or just about an assignment in school, or just check online to your next flight, or just do some very simple task. And you're lost in it for hours and hours without realizing that you are there. Basically, this digital despot is fed by two things. Is fed by human attention, and is fed by human interaction. And the more you give to this, the more time you spend with it, the more powerful it gets. But are you getting as powerful when you are in this constant, unstoppable interaction at all times? So this was the absolute horror and terror of my childhood. It was early 90s, almost at the same time as the internet was created. There was this rumor in Guatemala and north of Mexico, and then it spread all over Latin America, about chupacabras. That is the goat sucker. And reports of peasants will describe it like this, you know? And it was this really evil mixed creature, alien, many will say, that will suck all the blood, will suck everything inside goats and farm animals. So there was this rumor, and mothers, of course, started using it. Oh, don't get out too late because Chupacabra will appear and suck everything out of you. So friends in Brazil from a campaigning organization, they invented something similar to Chupacabra, the Chupa data, the data sucker. So they are launching a campaign to make people realize how our very small device, this thing that we carry in the pockets, or this tiny little computer, actually got smaller in size and weight. It got bigger and bigger in intervention in our lives. It mediated, like most of the interactions now are mediated by a device. You cannot even capture a memory with your eyes. You know, you have to have a screen mediating the moment. You have to have a screen mediating love interactions even. You spend more time texting your boyfriend than talking to your boyfriend and looking at your boyfriend or girlfriend into the eyes. That's the reality today. And what we ignore, and we ignore the first part, that technology is politics, is, and more researchers, public interest researchers are starting to reveal is, number one, your computer is sexist. If we thought that computers was neutral and that computers will treat equally women and men, we were absolutely wrong. That's the first thing, and I will elaborate about it because it's a very interesting claim. Even your computer is sexist. Then your social graph, that means the people that you are connected to, I mean the people that you are even remotely connected to in social networks that you are constantly feeding and feeding and feeding, can land you in jail. You can be suspicious of very serious things by just by a remote link of someone who can be even mistakenly being suspect of something. And you can be target of very heavy surveillance just to be remotely connected with someone. The third thing is that the promise that technology will make everything like better jobs, better careers, better paid labor is a lie. Like technology, as it has been shown even locally in Silicon Valley and periphery, has created more inequality. And the fourth thing is that exploitation has only increased globally. I mean, all the fancy devices that we have in our hands are a result of mining exploitation and increased conflicts over minerals somewhere else. But it is getting closer. Conflicts are getting only closer to us and to our comfort zone. And the fifth thing is that, you know, like we hear data. Data is wonderful. Data is the new oil. Data is going to make our life easier. And actually, data, and especially when politicians and companies and so on take the decisions based on big sets of data, has bias. So we are in this situation with these data soccer devices that are like far prettier than this one, and that we are, they're not killing goats and stealing anything out of us, but they're stealing something more vital for us. They're stealing time. And we will see later a reflection that, and attention. And Tim Wu, one of the theorists on internet net neutrality and many other technology issues, he just published a book about this and how attention, the level of attention that is demanded from us, from this digital despot, this combination of systems that require our attention at all times. Actually, if you have a reflection, is your life at the end of the day will be what you paid attention to, those moments that are recorded in your mind. If you're living your life and literally living your life into a device that is just creating all the problems that I described, that's your legacy. So it's something to consider, like very, very, very carefully. But as I said, I love technology, and really technology is great to make the life easier in so many ways, you know. You can have a personal butler, a personal driver, someone delivering your food to the door, a calendar, recorder, the map. Like you have so many. You feel powerful. You feel empowered with all the things that you have. The thing that we don't know is that on top of, I mean, this is just the sugarcoat. Under the sweet surface, there's many, many more things that companies are doing. And that, of course, you can opt out, but you rarely opt out. And in the long term, the accumulation of that knowledge is given to a tiny set of companies unprecedented power. So who is the digital despot? In fact, the digital despot is you and me, the sum of all of us. And all these constant feeding of this monster that goes growing and growing and growing, and is not necessarily benefiting directly any of us, because that's a graph from a colleague and very respected designer and activist, Aral Balkan. And he claims that we live, we have to decide in between which system we want to live on and regarding our data and technology in general, in a democracy or a corporatocracy. And he claims that the way that we keep feeding and feeding and losing total control of our data, behavioral data and collective data, just to feed companies based in a single country, by not only by a computer, but wearables, all the things around us and so on, is just making corporations more and more and more powerful and making us more and more and more vulnerable. There's still very few solutions on how to take the control of our data back. Because there are ways, and we shouldn't think that it is impossible to take control back to our technology. There are ways, but the problem is that our consumption habits, our choices, and our daily life constant interaction with these devices is more in this direction than in the looking for solutions. So basically, that sums up everything. Swipe left, swipe right, click, accept, surround. As we go back to the first slide, technology is not isolated from politics. And this is not very new news, if you can see. 2014, God knows what Silicon Valley is going to do in the times of Trump. God knows what if US enters in a war with China, for example, or with Russia or so on, what will happen or what emotional manipulation is already exercised on us using these platforms. Concrete case, and which is a case very close to my heart because I have many Syrian friends. You know, I have many Syrian friends who have been fighting for their freedom and their human rights for years, since this conflict started, since 2009, or before that I know them. The situation was completely invisible. Now, if you open a Facebook page, it's all there suddenly. You know, it's like it started like a few months ago, the tragedy of thousands of people. And it happens, it reminds me what, and it's not different of the manipulation that happened offline. I remember, like in my country, in Guatemala, we have great inequality and a continuous situation of famine in different communities. Any time that my government wanted to distract the attention and divert the attention of a very serious political problem happening, they will, the headline will be like 15 or 500 kids died of famine in this location. They will select the saddest picture of a little kid, like in the bones, you know, like like dying basically, and they will put it in the front page, and it will be the news for a whole a week, while something else very serious was happening. because of course we are humans, but sometimes you get distracted with the daily life, you know, and the likes, and you forget that there are big problems near you. And the way that newspapers in my country used to manipulate and use these children that didn't get to that situation overnight, you know, and highlight at a key political moment, it was very serious locally. But imagine if you have the power to manipulate feelings of hate, of compassion, of whatever, but also of consumption on a global scale. What an unprecedented power this digital despot has. Not only that, by the constant interaction and feeding of things that are not, they're personal things, not necessarily like public interest things, like the birthday party of your 101 grandfather. It might be like really relevant for you, but not for the rest of us. But you keep broadcasting your life, you know, and that makes that machine very intelligent in a way on how to, which words people use when they're happy, which words and phrases, which images get the most likes, which expression is more effective to, and gets more acceptance within certain region to express an emotion. And that shouldn't be ignored. That's in part responsibility of these companies, in part our responsibility as well. So this is the GAFA. Remember that because you will read it more and more in newspapers, because, you know, like especially American journalists reporting tech and some European journalists reporting tech, they love acronyms. So GAFA is the four most powerful internet companies, Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon. Well, Google is no longer Google, so it's now Alphabet, so it now will be AFA or FA. Something like that. But these companies are more powerful than nations. I mean, the wealth that they generate, it's far greater than many nations together. So GAFA is a key actor in, and it will shape in a specific way the system, this despotic system that I'm describing. So, but developing countries and mid-income countries like Serbia are not, and their governments, they are not stupid. I mean, they were like slow to catch up and realize the power that technology had to capture attention, to manipulate people and to control people. But they are like quickly catching up and using it into their own corrupt systems. So. This is a part of the graphs that the data soccer friends develop in Brazil, but that's a policeman from Brazil. And he's using Tinder as part of his work, as UK cover police use as well. So basically, all Brazilians are connected. All Brazilians are online. All Brazilians are super sexy, sensual, and active. On this kind of networks. So police decide that the best way to intervene and disrupt activists there was using Tinder. And so there were like a bunch of really attractive policemen posing as Tinder people, getting into closer and closer to activists. By the way that the app is designed, that they will be located near the houses of activists, they will just get hold of all the information. So technology cannot be isolated either from the local social practices and dangers that we face. It could happen to anyone, you know. It could happen to anyone without a understanding on how technology is political and can be used for political purposes or for criminal purposes, of any purpose. You will hear a lot how internet is a human right, and access to internet should be granted for everyone, and should be granted for everyone as fast as possible. That has been the motto of many organizations, like philanthropical organizations that are suspiciously connected with the GAFA in the last 4 years. for me, it's really, really difficult, you know. Like, I consider myself privileged. I had access to a computer since I was 8 years old. I had access to the really slow, that you probably never heard of, internet connection via your telephone that took like ages to download an email. I was very, okay, I had problems with my parents when the bill of the telephone arrived because I wasn't a hacker, so I didn't know how to connect without paying, sadly. I should have met Julian before. But I enjoy that internet. So it is a mixed feeling because, I mean, you spend so much time in that. So who I am to say, like, don't give internet for free to the poor children in Africa and Guatemala and exclude them from being part of this culture, because that's what the propaganda says. It is a way to be in the world. If you are disconnected, you are not there. And it's a big fallacy. First, because from here we will, the most relevant actors are Google and Facebook. What many of them are offering is not access to the whole internet, it's access to the internet of the poor, to poor internet basically, and limited knowledge. And what they really want to get the social graph of the entire world. And as we have seen, as inequality increases, it's highly likely that the disruptions in our comfortable areas, and in comfortable Paris, and in comfortable Brussels, and in comfortable Germany, will come with people connected with the poorest of the poorest in the world. So it is really important to get the graph of the poorest of the poorest of the world as soon as possible, and be able to track them, monitor them, know what they are thinking of, and if possible, predict them. So this where they spent like a lot of money in India because they really wanted to get India in for two reasons. And one reason I will not elaborate here because it will take me a lot of time to explain. The first reason is that they want to get India cashless as soon as possible, and that the ambition, secret ambition of philanthropist Mark Zuckerberg was that Facebook will provide a way of payment. Imagine if you pay with a service or an app that is associated to your Facebook account. Imagine the treasure of data that will bring to advertisers, to intelligence services, and to even government services in a country that is still separated by caste. So it is very, very, very serious, but it is, I mean, the images that they use, I mean, you can see is, you know, family values, friendship, digital equality, whatever it means. And so, transport cards, that's also important to think of. We think that these digital traps are only in our computer, on the internet, in the telephone. But actually, these mechanisms of digital control and tracking and constant monitoring are moving to things as simple as a transport card. For example, imagine something in your pocket that can monitor everywhere, how long it takes, where did you get in, you get out. And yes, it can be used to activists, but I'm very aware that not everyone is activist. There's just a minimum group of activists, but it can be also monitored by employers. It can be also monitored by like anyone who can get hold of this data, and the combination of all the data can predict the movements of a whole city. And if the citizens do not have access to the same data to make the city a better place, then we are again in a situation of imbalance, you know. They can play with prices in the most used areas. They can exclude zones that are not used by, I mean, it can create exclusion. And something happened as well. In the early days of the internet I loved, the internet I defended and worked for, it was the internet that was like, it was like more like jungle, you know, like everyone could arrive, everyone could explore. There was no limits. If you were like Guatemalan or German, you had access to the same space. and you could create and erect anything that you wanted if you had the knowledge and you had the tools. Then it starts fragmenting, and all these claims, oh, and I imagine that you feel very uncomfortable with the phrase, the Balkanization of the internet. I hate the phrase. Well, this segmentation of the internet that many use, oh my God, Russia wants to fragment the internet and to create their own internet. Oh, Cuba wants to do the same, China did the same, and so on. Actually, that started long before, and it started by pure commercial purposes. As geolocation of your service, I mean, for example, content, how companies and content providers limit the geographical reach of certain content to certain countries, and how when I'm conducting my research from Germany or the US, I get different results, and I have access to different journals that if I am doing my research from Guatemala or from here. That is political, that has an impact on the development of our science and discoveries and so on. And that only got worse with mobile phones. Again, mobile phones were that, oh, now it's possible for everyone to be connected to the internet because mobile phones are cheap, and mobile phones, you can get them everywhere, and you can charge them. Like, I mean, there's this ridiculous advertising of okay, they don't have water, they don't have electricity, but they have internet via the mobile phone, you know, like, and the happy kids in Kenya or in the favelas in Brazil and so on. So and I will get closer to this because I don't see, I need glasses, but I refuse to wear. Not very smart. So there's different in a mobile phone. There are different points of control that you didn't have in a computer, at least in the traditional way to access the internet via web. And it is that the telephone companies gain unprecedented power on the content that is accessed and distributed through your mobile phones. Telephone companies are like subject to very tight, in general, national regulation and control. It makes easier to censor something, shutting down mobile network in specific geographical area. It is most of the software and hardware running on a telephone is proprietary. So it's not, it is really hard to build upon. For example, when you had web-based only things, anyone could create any page and you could access it. When you need to access something via an app store, Android or Apple App Store, it comes with the politics of the company. It's the politics of an American company. For example, if you wanted to read Wikileaks cables during the Wikileaks revelations in 2010, some volunteer, as it happened with the internet of the early days, quickly set up an application that will allow anyone to read any cable on the iPhone and search it, highlight it, and so on. That application was kicked out of the Apple Store for political reasons. But that not only happens with it, that basically is a race that only the big fish get the place there, get the top result, and it only benefits a very powerful section of developers. And at the end of the day, the tiny developer in Serbia or in Costa Rica, well, is eaten, swallowed often by the big fish, you know, and is only measured by how much data they can suck, how big Chupacabra they can be, not by the quality of the service. And another, like closing this ability to innovate in mobile platforms is a problem. Also, the vulnerability of the trust systems and the verification systems of a mobile phone is different from the computer. And it also, when we access certain platforms, it has the ability, like companies, the way that is designed, can delete content from your telephone, from your proprietary systems, without you even noticing, or without you being able to exercise. I mean, you're under the rules, and there's little, it's a total private domain. It's very little space to fight for our fundamental freedoms there. And the other thing is that it is the ideal tracker of all your movements because you carry it at all times. Backdoor hardware make possible, as we have seen in Snowden revelations, by the American companies, or by the Chinese companies as well, by Russian companies as well. They enable backdoors by design that permit to activate controls, activate your microphone, activate your camera with you noticing. And DRM, of course, digital rights management, gone are the days of us downloading everything we wanted from the internet, music, videos, and so on, and being able to play those on our devices. Because if our device is a telephone, and if we want to play anything that we want in a telephone, it's not going to work because it is the enforcement of copyright is automatized and can land you in jail for stupid download a song illegally. But now, Internet of Things. I'm sure that you have heard the term Internet of Things. I will play this video very quickly, and I know that we are like super over time, but I will play this video very quickly to get now it's Christmas time, you know, so it's very timely to watch this.
There are some toys you really don't want in your home. This is Kayla and IQ. Unfortunately, these two internet-connected toys are not as innocent as they look. There's not added any kind of security. With simple steps, I can talk through the doll and listen to other people.
No one wants others to speak directly through the doll, or use it to eavesdrop to what is being said. That this can happen from a long distance makes it even scarier.
And you may think that the conversation remains between the child and the doll. It does not. The conversation between the child and the doll is directly sent to a company in Burlington, Massachusetts, who can practically do whatever they want with the recording. And if that wasn't enough, when you use the toy, you also accept terms that allow the company to use the recording of the child for targeted advertising. It can share it with practically any third party they see fit, and they can change the terms at any time without notice to you. This is, in our view, a massive breach of many consumer laws. Kayla, can I trust you?
I don't know.
So that's an example, a very quick example of what's going on. And what's going on is that, and that's of course from Finnish Consumer Association. In my country, we don't have the luxury to have consumer associations looking into such topics, but certainly lots of toys from China, US, and so on arrive to like toys, plastic toys, lots of them, very cheap, very innovative, and you have, because of this consumerism that really traps kids, middle-class kids especially. Oh, of course, all kids this Christmas will want the talking doll, you know, that will talk back to you. And some parents, naively, without any understanding of how technology works, will say, yes, it will be great for the kid to learn how to speak, to learn languages, pronunciation, and all the virtues. The serious thing is that the business is no longer the toy. The serious thing is that kids, even kids are being farmed. Even the voice and data of kids is being used to have better and better and better advertising to us to capture our attention. And to close this part of the Digital Despot, so what are we living? This is the former president of Uruguay, and I just want to play quickly this video when you can see, well, actually what happens with time. It's very short video, so it's just a reflection for you to think of before we get into the political part of all of this.
Inventamos una montaña de consumo superfluo y hay que tirar y vivir comprando y tirando, y lo que estamos gastando es tiempo de vida. Porque cuando yo compro algo, o tú, no lo compras con plata. Lo compras con el tiempo de vida que tuviste que gastar para tener esa plata. Pero con esta diferencia. La única cosa que no se puede comprar es la vida. La vida se gasta. Y es miserable gastar la vida para perder libertad.
So, what the reflection that I want to do is like, we are even spending our lives, not even to spending lives on labor to buy stuff. We are even trapped in a more dangerous trap of this digital despot. We are spending our lives making advertising, making the prediction not only of us individually, but of all of us more and more and more efficient. And it is not only our individual freedom that is at stake, it's our collective freedom. I mean, we have seen how powerful Facebook is getting, these platforms are getting in predicting emotions and manipulating things. So manipulating elections, manipulating even nominations of people, manipulating priorities of a country, that can be achieved, and that's very, very, very dangerous. So that's more reflections on the politics of this. This absolute control of platforms and total surveillance of all of us. I mean, I cannot stay long on Snowden revelations and how complex this surveillance system is, but we could do it in the next time. That's not freedom. And when someone tells you that the so-called internet freedom is a free internet, it is wrong. It's not. It's very far from free. But resistance is possible. These things that I showed you before of this India that is highly unequal, that I mean is really precarious democracy and so on, achieved the impossible, and they achieved to say no to the free services of India, of Facebook in India. And they refused it because citizens, local citizens, in partnership with comedians, in partnership with different sectors of society, they realized how dangerous it was to surround completely and give total access to their local poor and the more vulnerable population to these systems. And they defeated, it was a very hard campaign because it was, they were arguing against free internet for people who are poor. But they did it, and it's a very, I invite you to look online on the battle that and the techniques that they used, because it was effective. It was really effective, and they completely kicked Mark Zuckerberg out of governing the lives of the poor. And China, I mean, China is not all this very, very hard panorama that I explained. China is, for China, US and their platforms are not a threat, because they long before, they developed their own platforms. They don't have the same web engines. They don't have the same applications. They are able to develop their own software and their own hardware. But it's their solution, and we do not want to live in a situation like the Chinese situation, right? With restricted speech and so on. But we shouldn't also live in the fantasy that we enjoy freedom, that we don't. And so alternative things, alternative solutions coming from different places are needed to preserve this collective freedom. And most of all, I mean, many of these control systems, at least the decisions and control systems that are decided by the public organization, by the public parts of the state and the local state. For example, how much a state spends in software that is produced somewhere else, how much a state spends in monitoring cameras that are just not effective. And all this public expenditure is a point of activism that we can fight back and criticize to restore a little bit, at least, the freedom to walk in the streets without being monitored by a state actor. Local a little bit like with food, produce local, consume local. I think that we should more and more try to support local initiatives that are respectful of our data and find ways that our collectively generated data that can be used in the public interest stays as such. And like there's many ideas, and the conversation is very new, like data cooperatives, for example, health issues. You voluntarily giving your data away to local research institutions and restricting the use and collection of health data to any pharmaceutical company, for example. But it is still in the exploratory phase, and we need, and as companies get more sophisticated, so we all need to spend a little bit of the time instead of. So I've been thinking about how to find alternatives. And the way also is we need new diplomacy. And in this, I was talking before in a private lecture, how any diplomat, how any public officer dealing with these problems, any consumer protection office, anyone with power should understand how technology operates. But actually, that should be a right of everyone. When you see, for example, a bottle of Coca-Cola, you see in the label of the bottle all the information about it. How can you read what's happening inside your phone? I mean, do we want to give away the ability to understand the technology that is surrounding us? Because one thing is your computer, your telephone, and a very different thing will be like the things that will be all around us, like this creepy doll or a creepy trash can or a smart television that can spy on you as you are sleeping. And that is a set of discussions that we should have in the near future. This is Eben Moglen, a professor at Columbia University, and he says something very important. And he said it 10 years ago, we didn't listen. He said it 5 years ago, we didn't listen. Then this year, he showed up for elections, like, okay, we almost ran out of time in finding a solution. And he says, like, basically, it's not only time the most precious thing that we as humans should preserve. The most precious thing together with time is the freedom of the mind. You know, you have heard stories of political prisoners. It's the only piece of dignity that you have left at the end of the day when you are in a very precarious situation. If you are not free to think without anyone knowing or predicting you, you are like you're not human anymore almost. So, but freedom of the mind, he says, depends on freedom of the media, which depends on freedom of the software, devices, and networks we use now. As I explained, we are losing control of devices, of software, of media, of that very basic freedom that we used to enjoy. And he insists that we need to become unpredictable enough. So we free spaces of resistance. And something that you have to understand is very, very important, and I cannot stress it enough. People who are different are seen as anomalies by these automated systems. People who think different, who act different, are like, are flags. Edward Snowden showed it in the revelations that he published, that the journalist published after he gave to journalists, showed that, for example, if you're into languages and your browsing habits show that you're learning Arabic, for example, because you want to learn Arabic. Maybe you met a guy who speaks Arabic and you want to speak the local language, Maybe you're just curious about Islam and you're researching that. Maybe if you're in a network, if the people around you are like glued to Netflix doing nothing or just checking fashion magazines, and you're the weird person investigating Kurdistan, or the weird person learning Spanish, or the sociologist simply investigating the impact of the war on drugs in your region, you become a flag. you are showing a behavior that is different from the behavior of everyone else. If you have very disruptive opinions, or if you have different sleeping habits of the rest of your neighborhood, you become a flag. And I really refuse to live in a future and in a society that anyone who doesn't act like the crowd is an anomaly, and it's going to be like subject to further monitoring or even exclusion by algorithms. So in our very personalized future, because as we feed and feed and feed this machine, we are giving away so much information, especially for people who are under 30 now. It will heavily, because luckily, those of us who are over 30, those embarrassing years, we lived it without social media. And we lived those very disruptive and embarrassing years without posting our entire life online, because it was expensive to do so, and our telephones were telephones like the telephone of Maya, but bigger and expensive as well. So all the things and all your digital shadow that follows you everywhere will impact jobs, even your travels, like even the combination of the publicly available data that you post online and the privately held data by insurance companies, by your school, by subscriptions, by all this Chupa data, is used to include you or automatically exclude you as a potential candidate of a job. When I mentioned that the computer is sexist, actually, your computer can tell if you are a woman or if you are a man. And often now if you use Google as your search engine, it usually connects your email account with your YouTube account, with your browsing habits, sometimes even with the Facebook profile. So when you turn in, and even by just naming your computer after your name, like Flora Gonzalez, okay, it's a woman, right? And so it shows that when you're searching, and the search engine knows that you're a woman and you're looking for a job, the results that the computer shows, or even the targeted advertising of the jobs in a website of jobs, will show the lowest positions, will not show directive positions, because they were designed to target like CEO, CFO, and so on, to target men. So the computer actually, like this, embeds these real situations and exclusions of real life into this automatic system. And less you apply for a job that is posted on a newspaper and go to the office yourself. And more automated systems, especially when you're applying for your first, second, third job, or when you are applying for a job abroad. These filters are creating mechanisms of exclusion that are invisible and that you cannot challenge and that you cannot expose as gross injustice. Insurance and health is a tragedy. I mean, as the Internet of Things takes over, and companies can monitor your habits, companies can monitor your consumption of certain foods and so on. All the information that we put out there, insurance companies and insurance health companies and in general will start punishing those who had what they will consider an unhealthy lifestyle. So we all will have to prove that we exercise, that we buy healthy food, because your refrigerator can actually say what, like it's connected to the internet, that can actually say many, many things about you, and will make, for certain people who are not following the pattern of the desired pattern of what you are supposed to be, making life more burdensome, and getting nudges. Oh, you have to exercise, you have to drink water, you have to do this, you have less free. And not only that, for insurance and health issues, I mean, our health data was very private, and now is collected from many, many sources. That if you had, like, for example, an aunt who died from heart disease, and you posted on Facebook, oh, my poor aunt died from heart attack and so on, and you didn't disclose that in your form when you're applying for life insurance, for example, they are getting that data. And actually, Facebook has patented a service that will patented a service to predict and connect with creating profiles of this kind of data. And more exclusion, even more exclusion. Okay, first round in the 90s, we privatized everything. Maybe here was a little bit later, but in Guatemala, early 90s, after the war, everything got privatized. And now on top of that, we will have that. So we were like, we don't have public health and public education anymore. And on top of that, we will face this injustice. Control and policing, as I show you with the case in Brazil, with the cards and targeted. I mean, that's the most obvious example, I think. Politics and the future of campaigns and manipulation, that's also very serious. And of course, wars. And in the issue of wars, we are facing something very interesting. So artificial intelligence and many projects around artificial intelligence are training destruction machines, basically. So there will be no human liable, practically. They will be like automated bombs that target specific things based on predictions done by all the data the military gathers. And who's to blame? I mean, if with the drone pilots that are sitting in Germany or in Texas killing people remotely was already very, very hard to humanize a target, a human target, for them perpetrating that. How can you humanize a robot whose mission is to get rid of these flags that they see as irregular behavior? So it is a whole, I mean, as we are seeing here, is a tremendous disbalance of power and a whole set of ethical questions for our future with very little leverage for us left. What I said that your computer is also racist and it embeds the prejudices of the people who code the computer. This is an example, you know, like most of the things are designed in the US, not only in the US, in Silicon Valley. And in Silicon Valley, not by diverse group of designers, mostly by men who are male, who are white. Men who are heterosexual and white. And that is embedded in the design so much that, for example, Nikon cameras, the algorithms, the instructions that the computer dictates to itself, that are coded by humans, of course, in a very sophisticated way, perceived when you were taking pictures of Asian people, they put that they were blinking. Well, that's just a stupid camera, you know, racist camera. But what happened next was in airports, when there was an automated service of passing through a border, and Chinese people were going through, Japanese people going through, like Vietnamese, and even like any people with the eye that is the different shape of eye, right? The system to get through an automatic border was saying, like, open your eyes to take your picture, so to get you through, to get the biometrics. Open your eyes. And they were like, I cannot open my eyes more, right? Open your eyes, or you cannot be, you will not be allowed through this. Open your eyes. And if it's already like virtually impossible to deal with a bureaucrat. I mean, personally, I don't know if, as I say, I don't know the local context, but I know Guatemala. And sometimes it's like a dialogue like that, you know, no, show me your passport. And sometimes it's really, really hard to dialogue with a bureaucrat in a position, in this unique position of power. And you have corruption, you have many, many things. But I still prefer to deal with a human who will differentiate open eyes and closed eyes from an Asian person with a machine that will irrationally lock me out or lock me in a place because of the way it was coded. And that's the situation that we are, and it's not getting any better because the industry is not getting more diverse. So the prejudice and this very very flat way of perceiving the world is embedded in the technologies. And these two other examples. Hewlett-Packard software doesn't see black people. So when you do something automated, there's like no people there. And Google Photos mistakenly tagging black people as monkeys. I mean, it is just that when they are designing the products, they're not considering a global, diverse world. They are just considering the rich of the world that happen to be white. And that's reality as well. So we are heading very quickly to a different form of totalitarianism, total control of us. That is, before we had all the spies, you know. When I was doing my human rights work in Ecuador, trying to secure Julian asylum, I had my first encounter with a real spy, old school. The guy will go, like we were with Baltasar Garzón, and we were just having a legal meeting, and the guy go with newspaper like this. And he was following everywhere. He will change color of shirt, but we know that it was the same guy, you know. And then he will pretend to be with the wife and take pictures. I miss those days, you know. I really miss the days that surveillance was so visible. Of course, it was brutal, but it was, I mean, you knew. I know it was imposed on some, not imposed on all of us. Now, they don't need spies. Actually, the platforms, we are doing the work of the spies. We are doing the work every day. And as I said before, you don't need fear. MB works much better, and this competition of your social profile and your social network, right? Everyone informs on everybody. Everybody watches everybody else. From the worried mom, oh, my daughter connected at 3 p.m. and disconnected. And then she connected at 1 a.m. and disconnected. And her location shows, like, you know, like we become detectives and we are checking on what everyone is up to every country, spying on every country, to the most powerful country predicting everyone else. A concentrated power like never before with increased political ambitions, because I see more and more the Silicon Valley people in Pentagon meetings, in Brussels, in security meetings. Oh, tech companies are going to defeat Daesh, and claims like that. And it's a new form of populism, because these tech lords are promising things that are completely unable and incapable to deliver. I mean, they cannot even deliver software that works. So they can certainly not fix the world in the local complexities that we face. There has been like this buzz, oh my God, Donald Trump wants to create a Muslim registry. Well, actually, there's no need of that registry. With all the information in the platforms, even if the person was never online, with all the information available and collected by all the cameras, all the borders, I mean, any person living in the US under such heavy surveillance, and especially foreigners, that they certainly don't need a Muslim registry. They already have it, and they are collaborating closely with companies. So all this fuss and all these promises, I promise I will never create a system to this, just lies and gaslighting of more serious issues. And we should be very aware of this effort to graph everyone and be very suspicious on when they want to give internet away to the poor, and be very critical of those problems in your local communities and your local poor. You have the privilege of education. You have the privilege of speaking more than one language. You have many, many privileges. You're really super privileged. So with privilege comes big responsibility, and if you are aware of these problems and you hear something happening here with refugees, with a digitalization of things, try to get informed and try to dig deeper into the technologies that are used for the poor or for the problematic people in society. And do not forget inequality in all of that. 62 people own more than half of the world. That's reality today. And I recommend you to follow my friend on Twitter and Facebook and so on. Like, he's in all the platforms that he criticizes. Aral, he has brilliant, when you have nothing to do, watch his talks on all these problems and how design has been abused to make us less and less free. And how, of course, Mark Zuckerberg says that privacy is dead, but and not his privacy, your privacy, if you can see. He's protecting his camera in the laptop, and he's blocking the microphone in his laptop. And he made sure to have personal privacy by buying all the houses around his house, so no one will look into him. So some reflection that many do is, so if so few people have concentrated so much wealth, of course they want the global graph because they're kind of scared, you know, like half of the planet can certainly execute 62 people with the right organization. But they redistribute well. But that's not going to happen if, and I don't want that to happen because I believe in human rights and I believe in human dignity. My question is, do they believe in that? And what are they willing to do to preserve the status quo? And is more surveillance, more walls, more citizens completely asleep, and more citizens absolutely giving away their rights just for freebies, you know? So new political configurations. So this was Hillary Clinton 2010, pre-Wikileaks. In her famous internet freedom speech, she said, information networks are helping people to discover new facts and maybe making governance more accountable, until the accountable government was the US. So if we look back and then we look at today, all the fake news rhetoric and all is fake, internet's bad, destroying democracy, it's very interesting to contrast these two speeches. So that's what she was saying. She was describing technologists and hacktivists in Iran. And their courage is redefining how technology is used to spread truth and expose injustice for peaceful political purposes. And she declared that censoring and repressing that activity was absolutely unacceptable. And then Wikileaks happened, right? And that's, again, what she said. On their own, new technologies do not take sides in the struggle for freedom and progress, but the United States does. And that's important because that's the confirmation that, of course, they will use, and they are using, and they will not stop using technology for state political purposes. And then the Google doctrine, of course, how Google, together with Hillary Clinton, started this combination of state power and the power of startups to bring freedom, right? To export freedom and revolution, US style. Google diplomacy in action. Now more and more you will see these envoys from GAFA and the companies just below GAFA to enter and to establish the first contact, diplomatic contact and economic contact with countries that are characterized as closed. So you see Eric Schmidt in North Korea there, Eric Schmidt and his daughter went to North Korea, and they were like received, and they were like, it was almost a state visit, you know. The state of Google made itself available as the conduit to bring freedom to North Korea. And the same a couple of days ago in Cuba. They signed a deal to have all the data centers locally stored in Cuba. My question, and provide Cuba with good internet locally. My question will be, like, what will happen, and what is actually happening is probably what was the deal in Brazil when Dilma Rousseff said, oh no, I want the data of Brazilians staying in Brazil. What they were doing actually, because they can afford that, small companies cannot, they were storing the data of Brazilians in Brazil so authorities can get hold of the data of locally of citizens, and at the same time creating a mirror of such data in the US. Or even if the data doesn't leave ever Cuba, they will always have access to that data. So, and also it is interesting to see the multi-layered reaction against WikiLeaks. First round 2010 and second round this year. Like in between there have been many, many attacks. This is a little bit off topic, but for me it was important to make it visible. I mean, we have to be like very skeptical of, as we saw, how the discourse changed when the interests that are touched are their interest. So this was Palantir, one of the companies of Peter Thiel, one of the now closest advisors to Donald Trump in the transition. And this company was asked to design the perfect strategy to silence WikiLeaks and to destroy the organization completely. So that was the plan. And cyber attacks in infrastructure, media campaign to show how reckless, how, you know, like all of this is, it feels a lot like a deja vu from 2010, because that's precisely what happened with the DNC revelations, all. And the last one is very important for ordinary citizens, using social media to profile and identify risky behavior of employees. What's risky behavior of employees? Then a friend of mine got hold of a thing to assess the next diplomats in the German government. And if you posted enthusiast things online about Freedom of Information Act, for example, if you are posting like a critical publication, they have a list of critical publications of the government. If you post anything, I mean, that goes to risky behavior graphs that diplomatic units in governments are using, but also companies, you know. And there's nothing more secret than the transnational industry. And if you wish to work for a transnational company, do we want to be measured by what we say and what we think? Before it wasn't possible, because before our very heated political conversations were happening in cafes, face to face. And maybe, yes, the guy, the usual spook, you know, will hear and inform the repressive government. The problem now is that it's available for everyone at real time, forever, and that these dodgy companies design super failed social graphs that are based, again, in their American white prejudice. And that affects lives of very different countries, and without understanding very different context. In Guatemala, for example, everyone does memes and laughs, and we like humor is our way to cope with politics. We make outrageous statements, you know, all the time in social media. I do not think that someone who cannot even speak Spanish, let alone understand the logic and the politics of local people, will be able to assess a person and the risk of this person based on automated translation. And certainly, I do not think that they will dedicate the resources to create personalized software to predict the risky behavior of Guatemalans from all places, or Serbians. And that will be like the future of recruitment, the future of assessing you if you should be given a scholarship of a PhD, the way that even maybe the United Nations will end up hiring people. So we should fight against this automatization of everything. And we should highlight how it is bias that will affect us personally and our next 10 years. And that's it's political. It's not only against Wikileaks. Wikileaks is the testing ground of what they can do, Then it's you're next. I mean, we are all next. But also it was. I don't want to just focus on the negative. Wikileaks certainly changed the diplomatic game. Just a few people with computers and crowdsourced donations of under $20 achieved far more than media, like critical media, did in decades. And that's what Hillary Clinton was saying, and sorry to mention her so often, but it's important. We shouldn't forget what they were preaching and what they're preaching now, and that was a dangerous and alarming alert. That was what she said. So information networks are forming a new nervous system of our planet. And the issue is who's controlling this nervous system and who can disrupt that nervous system. And I think that the power to create alternative system for our not alternative planet, because we are certainly not Elon Musk, we cannot migrate to Mars. We have here and we have now, is to start inventing these new networks that I will not stay because it will get too long. And also different politics. This is the mayor of Barcelona. I mean, Barcelona is a Spanish city. You will say why it is relevant, And what is special about this picture? The hope in local politics and different way of doing politics and appointing our leaders is the mayor of Barcelona was someone imagine that the people advocating for the Belgrade waterfront were elected and in power in Belgrade. It would be a miracle. It would be wonderful to have like politicians that fought for public good. She did it for housing, and she was fighting against the really rapacious system that was banks sending people to live in the streets, basically. And that was part of her political project, and she got elected. And it was one of the first authorities to receive a group of geeks, a group of internet activists from all over Europe and even some Latin America and so on, Australia, US. And we sat down with her, and we had a more scary conversation than the conversation that we had today with you. And actually, she listened, and that's the difference the difference of electing someone who comes from the people and electing someone who works for corporations, or other interests. And by listening that, she decided to dedicate some time and resources from her staff to design local initiatives and local systems, at least for the city of Barcelona. You will say it's only a city, right? But actually, it's a city that has like the size of, it's an economy that's larger than the economy of all Central America. And it's a very influential city. So she's doing, connecting this network of so-called rebel cities, and they are like examining the choices and the procurement decisions that a municipality takes regarding the software, the hardware, the Wi-Fi that is publicly provided, and so on. So different politics and people willing to listen, even at the local level, can start and has the necessary scale that is not only the individual habits, but it's a more broader policy that can be transformed. And it's all our support. And yeah, that's, so at the end, the problem is politics, but the solution can be politics as well, and combined with different other things, and us being more aware and more informed and more critical. And now, that's all from me. keep in mind that of time and how you use your time, and that everything is remembered forever, and that, yeah, that's all. And if you have any questions or comments, I'm happy to hear.